Diagwyv, agus céad míle fáilte a cóide. Ladies and gentlemen, all my gaming unicorns, I'm Jay Cotts, and 1,000 welcomes to the series of where I replay an entire game of yesteryear and discuss the story and gameplay, and finally ask, does it hold up to this day? Sit back, grab a cuppa, and chillax as we're going on an adventure. Sláinte. Cheers. Dark Cloud is an action role-playing game developed by Level 5 and published by Sony for the PlayStation 2. It's a game which uniquely combines RPG elements with city building. The game was eventually released in Europe in 2001, and I believe it was around 2002 when I first laid my teenager hands on this game, so this is a nostalgic title for me. So let me dive in and see what I think of this game in the present day as we play through it in its entirety, which took me around 35 hours to complete while doing most aspects the game has to offer. This story centers around the Chosen One trope, and this game drives this home hard. The problem with the story is that the real meat of the story does not actually take place until the final sections of the game, where a lot of this makes somewhat sense. If this was actually delivered during the adventure, I think it may have hit a lot harder. Tone. Nah, scratch that. We're calling him Snowflake, because Snowflake is the chosen one, chosen to survive for no other reason than he seems like a good person with a kind heart. Really, game? Okay. Now, during this opening sequence of selected dancing and blood ritual, we learn they are preparing to summon a dark genie. We notice a character is spying on the ritual. Pay attention to this silver-haired man. He is more important than you think to the story, but the game does not make this apparent until much later in the game, and a missed opportunity in the storytelling. We see this successfully summon the Dark Genie, who is more cartoonish and silly looking than some evil hell-bent on destruction. Even the general and his lackey point this out. But hey game, have him call forth some breakfast to show this guy means some serious business. Now we are introduced to our would-be world saver, Snowflake, whom is late for his village festival. He quickly finishes off the remainders of his soup, puts on his iconic green beret, and I'm going to cut this next scene short as the opening few minutes of this game focuses too heavily on dancing. Nothing wrong with dancing, but there is just a lot of dancing. But wait, the genie wants to do some dancing on his own by casting some magical missiles on the unsuspecting village of Nolan, devastating the town with each blast for no other purpose than being evil. Mwahahaha. Or at least, we think that for now. The game is trying hard to show that this genie is a badass. But just looking at him, it doesn't really seem to be all that badassery. Is that even a word? Isn't it? Snowflake watches as everyone dies around him and buildings are destroyed, but in his last heroic effort, he sees his friend and jumps to save her. Next, we wake up in some other realm, or maybe a dream or a vision, where the fairy king Simba... Really, game? Simba? This is not Lion King, but maybe it is an odd reference to a circle of life? And he informed Snowflake of the Dark Genie and the destruction he caused, where half the world was destroyed in one night. This is where we find out this fairy king is entrusting the fate of the world to this random boy because he has a kind heart. Really, fairy king. I just don't really buy your reasoning here. I'm sorry. The entire fate of the world rests on this boy because he has a kind heart? You could not have chosen a seasoned warrior or something, no? Anyway, the Fairy King bestows upon Snowflake the Atomilia, a stone of magical power which we will rely on heavily as one of the primary gimmicks of the game and story. The Fairy King reveals he saved a lot of villagers by converting buildings and people into spheres,
which then they come in contact with the Atomilia, can be released and restored into the world. This is where the city building aspect of the game comes into effect, a system I truly loved when I originally played this game on the PlayStation 2 back in the early 2000s. It was like a mini Sim City or theme park in this RPG tale. The Fairy King essentially then tells us, the player, we don't understand what he's on about, and he will visit us again. Well, thank you so much for just pointing us out that we're all dumbasses. Thank you so much, game. I love when games just take the opportunity to tell the player, you don't understand anything. It just doesn't really fit all that well. With that, we must visit the chief of the village, who somehow survived when everything else was wiped out. The game never properly explores this. I wonder why. Convenience? Probably. This is a feature we will see more and more again as the game progresses, that each area was wiped out in its entirety. But there is always at least one person who survives to tell you the mission for the area. Yep. Convenience game. The chief gives us the key to Dran's cave, who is the guardian of the area. Inside this dungeon is where all the Atla will be, and this is how each area works. The game will be divided into essentially the city building area outside of the dungeon and the dungeon itself. Each dungeon will be divided into 15 plus floors and culminates in a boss battle. There usually will be at least one floor which acts as a story driven floor, which usually requires you to work on some city building aspect before progressing further, and usually to unlock the boss floor, more work to the city is needed to be done. As we can see in the background, the moment we enter the Divine Beast's cave, the Fairy King needs to let us know we are a beginner and needs to give us a lesson on how to fight in the dungeon. Once again, Fairy King, I question your logic on why I was chosen. Instead of teaching us how to fight effectively, which the game feels no need to teach you any of these basics right now, he explains to us that each dungeon floor we will need a gate key to pass, and this key, in nearly every circumstance, is held on one of the monsters on the floor. Now bear in mind, this is random, so it could be on the first monster you defeat or the last, something which will be very painful as you progress. Sometimes you may find yourself reloading the game continuously at certain sections until it drops more favourably with certain characters. I'll explain a little bit more on this later. Along with this, we need escape powder if you want to leave a dungeon early if there are monsters still alive. Lastly, the most annoying aspect to this game, bar none, is that weapons can break and they will disappear forever. And if you thought Breath of the Wild was harsh, at least that game gives you a lot of weapons. So you need to be very wary of the weapon's health bar every time you fight, and before you enter every dungeon, you should save just in case you break a very powerful upgraded weapon in particular. And to make this mechanic even worse, monsters you fight could reduce your weapon's health by a lot more than you think per attack swing. This is a lot more evident, especially in the early levels of the game, and this will depend on your weapon's endurance. You hit a rock or metal. If you hit a rock or metal monster with your dagger, you could lose 8 or more health per swing. Always stock a supply of repair powder. Thankfully, the game gives you unlimited with the chief, at least for the first few floors. But that means you need to go outside each time, so in between floors. Want to know what makes this mechanic even worse? The sound you will hear when it gets close to breaking. A sound so infuriating you will want to repair before ever even hearing this sound. Combat is rather simple. You can lock onto enemies with circle and X to attack and continue to hit X to unleash the combo. Or 1 allows you to guard to defend against enemy attacks. You will unlock the odd ability as you progress, but mainly that is the gameplay loop divided over your party's various attacks over the course of the playthrough. The combat is not exactly fun, but the game demands you pay attention to all the other little systems within the dungeon itself and to think ahead a lot of the time. The problem with this game is the difficulty is pretty much front loaded in that you have so little resources to begin with in the first dungeon, and your weapons break far too easily, especially on later floors when you have so little money, lack of items, both offensive and restorative, and a lack of different equipment or allies to counter different enemy types. The game has a thirst mechanic, which is a stupid feature, only adding to the annoyance of items you need to carry and another bar to watch, as when you get thirsty, you slowly lose health. Sometimes floors will have healing fountains which instantly recover all your health and thirst and negative effects. You can abuse this system by fighting enemies near it and keep jumping in and out of it, so pray you get these often, especially in the early game, or reload until you do. You also have these little magic rings on the floor which can give you a beneficial effect or do something bad, like reduce your weapon's HP to almost breaking point. Upgrading weapons is a chore, as you must develop the weapon's core stats and elemental stats and monster stats depending on what the weapon requires, and it's always important to be building up the weapon in a path you want, or at the very least synthesize a weapon down to transfer a large portion of its points into a new weapon you pick up. A very good way to get powerful early on if you get lucky with weapon chests. The game will give you basic information on all of this, but it's all about experimentation, and if it goes wrong, it could cost you hours of grinding later on. Generally, you will want to clear out each level in its entirety, outside of any monsters which are too much of a pain in the ass to take out, provided you already have the gate key. Save on every floor, just in case, and on floor 3, the Fairy King is back with some combat basics. Basics he could have told us at least on floor 1 or even 2. But on floor 2 we saw a strange cat. Hold that cat in your thoughts. We'll be coming back to this very soon. Upon gaining some Atla, we will be met outside by the Fairy King once again, where he teaches us the basics to build our village back to normal. Although you can build the village back how you wish, each person will have their own ideal wishes which will add toward the overall completion score, such as things they are missing in their residence or where they want to be placed. This is arguably one of the most fun parts of the game, figuring out the puzzle of how they want to ideally rebuild each location. I found a shop and its merchant early in the dungeon, but once we build it, the chief will stop giving us free supplies, so something to be cautious of, especially if we're low on money, and you will be using this early into the game, but selling the fishing bait is always a useful way to build up easy money in the beginning. You can purchase gold bullion in case you KO in a dungeon so you don't lose 50% of your total gold, but saving every floor removes such a need. As we rebuild the town and insert additional items into each residence and overall completion, the buildings will have little red chests appear around them, revealing sometimes very valuable items. 2 such items, such as the fluffy donut, increases your max defense permanently. Each character will have their own individual favorite food to increase this stat. The next item is a Fruit of Eden, which can be used by any character until they get to their max HP, which each character has their own set max. Using this fruit will permanently add 10 to that character's health. Something I generally will use on Snowflake as a priority, as he will be my primary melee character. Getting back into the dungeon, we meet the silver-haired man we saw from the introduction. He doesn't seem to believe that we're good enough to be worthy of wearing the Atamilia. And you know what, silver-haired man? I actually agree with you. He mentions he has come to this time to retrieve our stone and claims he needs it more than we do. But before he delivers any more, he gets possessed and the game brings us into its dueling mechanic. Something we need to only do a handful of times in the game. It's a very odd thing to add into the game since it's rarely used, but scoring good enough by button mashing at the right times can earn us an additional reward. And I'm not really a fan of quick time action events, but this game has a couple and, they're not too intrusive, so it's not the worst. And after the quick time action combat, he gains the upper hand, but the cat seems to take him by surprise, and the game never truly explains this, but the silver-haired man could have killed us and got the stone if he wanted to, but he chose not to, and said that's enough for today, and it will be amusing to see how well we do. Once again, this game's story is not always that bright. He tosses us a changing potion as he talks about the cat, and all of a sudden the cat gets startled and runs away, only to become an Atla
Somehow, out of nowhere, the game never explains this. We acquired a stray cat and notice we cannot proceed any further for now, something the game will continue to do in every dungeon to force us to build the village more. We head outside and we find we can insert the stray cat into our own house, along with our mother and other valuables, and when we speak to our mother, we find out we can give the cat a name. So I made sure I was very creative and named the cat Catwoman. This may be a slight spoiler in the next clip, or a premonition if you will. A mother is so proud of us, of her genius, and whisks us away to talk to the cat upstairs once again, and the cat hints we need to do something to it. Ah, I know. Remember that changing potion just a moment ago? I wonder what it could do. And whoa, the cat becomes a girl, a cat girl, maybe even a cat woman, if you wish. Hey, I'm thinking about the future when she grows up. That's all. Squeezing your leg, your mother stumbles in on you two, getting it on, and all she asks is that a new friend? You stumble in on us, mother, and a strange cat girl clinging to my leg and being all needy, and you just say, is that a new friend? Really? And then you proceed to just walk away. Okay, she's down for that sort of thing, I guess. The Fairy King sends us a little telepathic phone call and quickly explains to us that allies are helpful in the dungeon. Great Fairy King, this will be very useful information for the next section. Back on the dungeon floor, we get taught that Catwoman can jump over these little crevasses which can appear on dungeon floors. How convenient that they only start appearing once we acquire the cat. What would have happened if this appeared on floor 1, let's say? No way round. Mission's over, boys. We proceed onwards and find out that only Snowflake, because he is the only one with the Atamilia, can open Atla. So if he perishes on a floor with Atla still remaining, tough shit, mate. You gotta repeat the floor again to collect the remaining Atla. And here comes one of the major gripes with the game, which comes even more apparent later on. When you get a new ally, they are so goddamn weak, the game discourages you to even want to use them. The game seriously should have increased their initial attack power or weapon values to make them competent. Look at the slingshot Catwoman uses, my first ranged attacker. It hits like a wet fart, but can be decent against flying enemies. I guess this is to try and balance the convenience of range safety versus up-in-your-face melee attacks, but if you're not close enough to the monster, they do even less damage. This game, and some of its gameplay decisions, honestly. We come back outside and I've fully completed Macho's house, and each time a building is fully restored, a special cutscene will take place and you'll be rewarded. Some of these cutscenes can be funny, cute, or in the case of the bathtub guy, very strange, particularly when he asks if we want to join him in the bathtub, which he is obviously occupying a significant portion of already. But hey, we are here for the reward and I cannot wait to see what upgrade he will bestow upon us. He gives us his soap? His presumably used soap he just washed his body with? Jeez. Thank you. Oh, but he is also so grateful. He's willing to give us his cheese. But only one slice of cheese. We just rescued you from the void and you give us soap and a meager single slice of cheese. That's it. Get back into the void. We finish another building at the same time and receive a fishing rod for our hard work. Although a much better reward than some goddamn soap and cheese, fishing is not something I enjoy in any game, so thanks for the thoughtful but useless gift. Maybe I can get the receipt and bring it to the merchant. I could really use a little bit of currency right now. One good addition is that when you enter config mode, you can quickly zoom around the area and plant yourself outside any building in no time at all, cutting down a lot of travel time outside. You can also instantly teleport to the area dungeon at any time. It's just a pity that running in dungeons is so goddamn slow, unless we have a special item called Dran's Feather, which I make sure to have always one on me at all times to get through the dungeon crawling on a much faster time. The last building I constructed allowed me to use the storage feature in the game to unload a lot of items I would rarely use, but can be useful in sticky situations or at the very least for money. The game's inventory can get quite messy and build up so fast, so being able to store items can be useful, especially upgrade materials, which you could eventually have hordes of. With all that done and getting to the boss level at the very end of the dungeon, we will need to have got a key to open the door, which is only gained from the city building aspect, a fact we will see time and time again as we progress. We step into a huge room and we see the divine beast himself, Dran, has been corrupted and is taking a shot at us. Now it's time for us to see how the game handles one of its few boss battles. Generally, a boss requires the ally you acquired along the way to counter its gimmick. In this case, when he's in the air flying, we need to shoot him down with Catwoman. Once on the floor, we can get in a hit or two with Snowflake and literally repeat this process for a few minutes. Dodge a few attacks, have some food on you to heal, some repair powder, and all should be set. This boss essentially is to test your ability in upgrading equipment, which unless you have got very lucky picking up a good slingshot in a chest, will have Catwoman's meager slingshot and possibly a few upgraded levels on Snowflake. The problem, once again, the difficulty with the game is front-loaded, and shortly after first acquiring Catwoman, you will start to see nasty enemies appear which should absolutely not be in the first dungeon of the game, such as the dragons and statues. Just hope your gate key is not on one of these enemies, as you will waste a lot of repair powder just trying to take these out, and probably a lot of food at the same time. These enemies will make you never want to use Catwoman, as she hits for maybe 1 damage maximum on these enemies at any one time. After enough hits on Dran, we will knock sense into him and he will give us a little bit of a backstory on the Dark Genie and the Moon People. He directs us to find the Moon People, who may be able to help us stop this threat, but the Moon People live deep in the woods beyond Matataki Village, our next destination. He gives us a lift outside and imparts on us a world map so we can move around the world faster along with more hints about our next destination. The game tracks completion of each location you come across, and if we successfully rebuild each village and carry out each of its denizens' requests, we can bring the completion to 100%, where we will be rewarded with not only a cutscene but something special for our efforts. By roaring at us, we can learn the windmill slash technique, where we can charge our weapon and after 2 flashes we can let it rip and blast enemies around us in a whirlwind type of attack. This is an attack I seldomly find myself using, as it will cause a lot of potential weapon depletion in quick succession. It's pretty much a worthless ability since our weapon health is so vital to our progress, and that damn beeping sound still plagues my nightmares to this day. With our hometown of Nolan saved, we are moving forward to the forest region, where we are once again in an empty zone, but this one will have a new gimmick to overcome and make overall completion that bit harder. But we're not alone. We are being spied upon by a chubby boy with a bear skin on his head. PETA would not be happy with this. He's convinced we are the monster, or with the monster, which destroyed the village and takes it out on us. I mess up the quick time event and he simply just tells me I'm not strong enough and runs away. What game? He wants to fight us because he's convinced we are with the enemy or are the enemy. And he bests us, and then he just runs away? He could have smashed us into the floor with that hammer he's carrying. Goodbye threat. But no, you let me live again for some unknown reason, just like that silver-haired guy back in the Divine Beast cave. It's like, there's no consequences for my actions here. We find out from our good friend, the Fairy King, that Trient is not awake and requires water to nourish him, so he sends us off to find enough Atla so we can place enough river parts which stretch from the water basin to Trent's position. So with all that, we enter the next dungeon of the game, the Wise Owl Forest. The Wise Owl Forest plays out quite similar to the Divine Beast Cave. However, this will consist primarily of forest-based creatures and elf creatures named after days of the week for some reason. However, the gate key works very differently here.
Once you get to the gate, you will meet an owl who will demand one of 3 potential gate keys, meaning you may need to wait longer to find the real gate key per level. And this also takes up a potential item drop from the monster and bag space too. This gimmick is only used in this dungeon. We will slowly progress through the dungeon, gathering the Atla, gaining levels on our weapons, and ensuring we gather enough river pieces from the Atla to complete the main objective to reawaken Trent. Along the way, we will get access to another shop, and he teases us with the Wise Owl Sword, a vital upgrade and forms the easiest path to the ultimate weapon Snowflake can use in the game. However, he will not part with the sword for less than 2,500 gilda. This will be one of our own personal objectives as we travel throughout the forest to acquire this upgrade as soon as we can, but essentially the ability to synthesize whatever current weapon we have to give a nice power boost to the sword the moment we get our hands on it. Each shop will have some different wares, most noticeably upgrade stones, which will be useful when we cannot get them to drop from the dungeons, because the grind in this game can be real. But we want to limit our buying of products until we get that sword. Mr. Owl, you have yourself a customer. Shortly after a few more dungeon levels, we will fix the river, connecting it from the waterfall source to Trent's location, gaining us access to a quick cutscene and progressing the story. We then take on the annoying moody boy again with the bear skin wrapped around him. And it's important to note, we will come back to this location often as items can be found around the trees of his treehouse and in Trent's location as well. Since the boy is very moody, I find it appropriate to call him Moody Bear. So it appears Moody Bear could very well become our next ally. Will he though? Guess we will need to wait and find out. Moody Bear will give us earrings to understand Treant, and with them we go and interact with the wise Treant himself. He supplies us with the mission to take down the dangerous serpent in the forest, and it can only be attacked with the serpent sword he gives us. A sword which cannot break until it achieves its task. The sword may prove to be a good upgrade if you haven't had luck or invested enough in your weapons properly to this point. Furthermore, he tells us that nobody likes Moody Bear. Well, that makes 2 of us. We complete another building, but we cannot get a reward until we find something white, coiled like a shell and very sweet. We will need to come back to this, but can we guess what it could be in the meantime? Moving on, we finish another building at the same time, and inside the village mayor reveals some history about the village and rewards us with a gourd, a useful item to increase our maximum water by 1. Similar to the Fruit of Eden, it will provide a permanent increase to the character you give it to, and especially in the early sections of the game, it is best to save these for characters you use the most. Gourds are found multiple times as rewards in this area, and I generally give them to Snowflake, but only when his water is low, so it provides a full replenish and it adds the increase. Smart, eh? We make our way to the midpoint of the dungeon where we draw out the killer snake, and as you will see in this cutscene, unless you have the serpent sword equipped, upon entering the scene, it will rebound off its carapace and you will be on tonight's menu. So I equip the serpent sword and see how it plays out. Let's watch. And with that, we take out the legendary killer snake. The serpent sword loses its magical unbreakable effect, and we find a bone pendant the snake carried. But it seems we cannot go any further just yet, so it's time to take my leave of this dungeon and hightail it back to Matataki village. and I hope you enjoyed that touching backstory moment. And with that, Moody Bear, one of the game's worst and easily the slowest character, joins our party. Hooray! Now we will head back to the 9th floor and we will learn how Moody Bear can open up areas where a large switch is on the floor. How this mechanical system works in a forest is beyond me, as it seems very out of place. Now we will need to rely on Catwoman for traversing little crevices and Moody Bear for door switches. What's next? Magic crystals? Wait, don't answer that just yet. Let's find out together. Now we're going to see this powerhouse in action, and exactly the reason I will never use this character outside of when I'm forced to. His attacks are extremely slow, and when you begin the animation you can get hit and the enemy can even block by the time you're done the smash. Along with this, his attack power is rather weak, yet his health is respectful. This game really needed to entice us to use new allies. It was the same problem as when we acquired Catwoman, but she is starting to see more usage now, as some of the enemies in the forest are easier to kill with her, especially if you find a good slingshot in a chest along the way. Oh, and Catwoman, maybe I was a little bit too quick to judge your felineness. A note on weapons here actually. You can equip weapons with upgrade stones and get their properties temporarily while they are slotted. I found myself doing this with gemstones in particular, which are rare rewards, yet very powerful. Okay, I decide to give Moody Bear another try. Maybe I was forced to, but yes, he is still an annoying character to use, and maybe we have Moody Bear fans here, and I'm sorry, but there are much better characters out there than him. One thing to really mention, which I have not yet, is that in these dungeons, every so often, you will enter a sealed floor, which forces you to use a single character for that run, and it's always an ally. This is why saving before every floor is a great way to keep on repeating floors with characters you rarely use and hope the gate key will drop early. You're welcome. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Before this point, we would have only seen 2 sealed floors involving Catwoman, one back in the Divine Beast Cave and in this dungeon. Naturally, on these sealed floors, Atla will not be present as Snowflake cannot be used, so the game can pad out dungeons to be even longer. Floors can also be limited, which usually involves a negative effect such as weapon experience being reduced, which is a pain in the ass, or maybe you get thirsty faster. After some more floors cleared, we make our way back to the village and we presented with a giant frozen tuna. And no, we cannot eat it. It's in fact a weapon for who other than our sweet Moody Bear. After finishing another building, we get a nice Fruit of Eden, and guess who will not see this? That's right, Moody Bear. Okay, am I being a little bit too mean here? Moving on to the next completion, we get a nice panoramic view of the area as the NPCs would see it, and also we are given a very important moongrass seed, which we will need to hold on to proceed into the dungeon. With this item, we will head back to the dungeon and open the door to the boss of this dungeon, Master Utan, who is being possessed by the Dark Genie. That's 2 in a row, boys. The strategy here is to avoid his arcing hands if you are in close range and avoid seeds that he will spit at a distance. Like Dran, we will need to use our latest ally here. Yes, Moody Bear, I choose you. Yay. You need to hit his body when his hands are not covering it. He will lie down to recover, and this is your time to get in some proper damage on him. So if you somehow used Moody Bear, he can do big damage to him, or most likely you will switch to Snowflake and use his windmill technique for maximum damage potential. The boss will run away and you simply rinse and repeat until he's defeated and come back to his senses just like Dran. Utan will apologize for attacking you and move the boulders out of the way, giving you access to the village of the Moon People. What's this? It looks like we are in for a rude awakening here, since the people obviously do not like being disturbed, and especially by humans. They knock us out, tie us up, but quickly let us free again, because their crystal ball proves that we are telling the truth about the Dark Genie. So cue a cutscene showing us the fortress the Dark Genie resides in, floating in the sky, smoking a cigar and appearing to notice us, somehow. Once again, they make this villain a bit too cartoonish to be taken any bit seriously. Is this really the main antagonist the game is going to throw at us? all will be revealed. The moon people tell us no one here can use magic to combat the genie, but their people on the moon can help us, and the only way to get there is with a moon orb. But wait, the moon orb is missing, so of course it is. Of course it is going to be missing. We can't have it that easy. So we jet off to find the MacGuffin in the seaside resort of Queens, as it potentially got mixed up in fruit. Yes, you heard that right. The moon orb, their precious artifact, got mixed up with some fruit. This is exactly the kind of story we are telling. I knew fruit could not be too good for you. But before we go to Queens, I wanted to wrap up the forest section by obtaining 100% request completion and getting a little cutscene where our grand reward for helping out is a measly level up powder. But wait, the greedy Moody Bear needs to be rewarded too because it's not fair. He did his share of the work and expects compensation too. Moody Bear must be from the UK. Just an observation, make of it what you will. So with a big achoo, the tree gives in to the moaning Moody Bear and bestows his father's very own battle axe. And for some reason, it's missing an E at the end of it. I don't quite understand why. It's not like they could not fit the characters on the screen like the old Final Fantasy games. But hey, whatever. Moody Bear just got a powerful axe. Too bad we will never use it. Oh damn, am I being too mean to him again? Yas, Queen! We arrive in Queens, a large portside town with a large space to rebuild, and thank God for the edit button to move us swiftly around the map. The annoying thing about Queens is that some of the red chests you get that appear as you progress are hidden in the corners of the areas and out in the central walkway, and you cannot use the edit button to travel quickly up and down that. So every so often you might find yourself running up and down to see if anything spawns. And sometimes, well, nothing has spawned. And just like in every other area so far, there is at least one person who somehow survived the destruction to give you all the dialogue you need. How convenient, game. This guy suggests that the moon orb may be on board the shipwreck at the bottom of the sea in the treasury. Once again, how convenient to use that as a means to enter the dungeon. Hi-ho, MacGuffin away! But wait, before we go there, we need to somehow get underwater. Ah, yes, but of course, he will entrust a stranger with a submarine, and somehow we can pilot this to the underground shipwreck. Okay, game. He informs us when the reigning queen died over 100 years ago, the people sunk her with the ship. Okay, that's a nice gesture. But he also informs us that when the town revived, people started to use the sunken ship as a treasury. How the hell is this ship not completely ruined from 100 years under the sea? How are people just entering it and just dumping valuables there? Has anyone actually seen how the Titanic looks after 100 years submerged under the ocean? Not only that, a whole dungeon is designed within this. Okay, maybe there is some special magic barrier preventing water entering, but the game never mentions this. So alright game, there is no explanation, so let's just say a wizard did it. I'm already forced to believe a lot of the crap so far, so why not just do this? Well, it's not like we're gonna venture on the moon soon without a helmet despite oxygen on the moon or anything like that. The game wouldn't be that crazy, I'm sure. Wait, don't answer that just yet. We now need to travel through 18 dungeon floors while finding the gate key, which thankfully returns to a single item in this dungeon called a hook. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is that on floors there may be a door which needs a key to proceed, and these keys are always found in chests. Also, there is a back entrance marked with a pink question mark on the floors that if you get the special access item, which can be quite rare to find, you can choose to enter the back section of the floor, which can act as a sub-level. Enemies are generally tougher and afflicted with a permanent stamina status condition, which makes them remarkably stronger. However, the trade-off is that the chests have a larger chance to obtain rare and even expensive items such as gemstones. These back floors can be well worth the hassle, since once accessed, They can be exited and re-entered for free, which respawns all the monsters, for those who want to grind experience for their weapons. I advise to not enter these back areas until you find the map on each floor and the magic crystal, which indicates where everything is on each floor. Another aspect I did not mention until now. Well, better late than never. A little bit into our sunken adventure, and we take another breather back in town with our newly acquired fish stall. The game introduces us to a rather silly mechanic, even if it makes practical sense in a way, even though the ice would melt realistically. But the game introduces fish that spoil unless placed in your bag next to a block of ice. Or we could just save ourselves the trouble and stick to some good old fashioned cheese, which has been doing us perfectly fine so far. Getting to the midpoint of the dungeon, we are faced with a little battle against a sea pirate and his underlings, and a new unit which will start appearing in floors beyond this point. A cannon. The cannon is slow, yet deadly, and since it is made from steel, we will need to be extra careful with our weapon health. Taking this encounter down quite easily, we will be forced to rest as we cannot proceed to the exit due to there is a coloured crystal blocking access to the next room. If logic is true, and it always isn't in this game, then this is another gating mechanic where a new ally will be needed to assist us. But we haven't seen any hints of this new ally yet. Or have we? We head back to town for a truly disturbing scene, which I'm just going to let it play out in its entirety because I have no words for what the developers were thinking with this scene. There's a reason I don't trust fortune tellers and never want my fortune told. Maybe it was because of this game in my youth. This is truly an unshakable scene. Moving on, we enter the cathedral where we are presented with more backstory involving queens and Queen Lysia. This game can be dark at points, and this story is one such. It explains why couples never really last, and it isn't that the love fades, but a curse. Are you sure they don't just begin to hate each other? I really enjoy the music box melody in these scenes to make them resonate that much more. Let's view it together, shall we? Finally, we find ourselves at the Kingpin's house after settling his matters, and he rewards us not with riches, but with a magical lamp. Maybe this is coming across a little bit like Aladdin? But lo and behold, our clumsy protagonist, chosen by the oh-so-wise fairy king, drops it on the floor, releasing a female genie. Now that we see the name appear, we just know this genie is going to be our next ally. So I try, with my mega mind, to choose a very convincing name fit to suit this genie. Let's see what I come up with. Just like the genie in Aladdin. And with that genie in tow, after telling her about the dark genie, she has decided she wants to be the only genie in town. Take that, Jafar. With Genie on our side, we can now open doors held back by those crystals. However, what the game does not properly explain to you is that depending on the colour of the crystal, you must shoot it with that corresponding element. Now once again, to gain elemental attributes on your weapon, it must be either built into the weapon or socketed. So it's not a bad idea to initially have at least one of each elemental type in your bags in case the game demands an attribute change on a weapon. Genie uses rings and is a magical spellcaster and easily the strongest ranged attacker in the game, leaving poor Catwoman on the sidelines even more.
From here on out, I focused my time on Genie and Snowflake as my primary two characters, only switching to others as last resort on those damn sealed floors, such as when they require me to play a specific ally. Another good tip, if thirst was an issue, is to use an ally you rarely use to run long distances and then switch to your main characters. While using Genie, we're going to make sure that each upgrade of her ring will count in a way that we're working towards one specific path to ensure maximum potential. Around this time, my wise owl sword was getting into a great position too, but sometimes we may need to buy or grind for certain upgrade stones. Remember that trading game we talked about earlier? Giving the shopkeeper the ointment will excite him enough to part with the foundation. Trust me, this little trading side quest will mount to something good. Or so I hope. Once we get to the final floor, we are stuck and cannot proceed in the final floor before the boss room any further, locked by some sort of music box. We head back to town to the starting NPC and find he is nowhere in sight. However, we will see something flashing on the table. It is a letter giving us some more information about this mystery. Reading the letter will reward us with the music box key, so we finally make our way through to the final floor once again and get the gate key. Once we open the music box, another little cutscene begins, further showing us the wishes of the starting NPC. We find out that Lesaya and our starting NPC had a romance together, but because of his lowly status, people would never have approved. So they agreed to make it happen at church. And voila! You're taken from the ship into a vision of this church. What's this? Lesaya was here all along? But wait, what's happening? The past Lesaya transforms before us into the Ice Queen, and thus begins the second hardest fight, in my opinion, the game has to offer. Lesaya has some very hard-hitting ice attacks, some which can freeze your character, opening them up to follow-up attacks from a giant ice block. Having some status removal handy can be useful here, or giving your main characters a stamina drink to boost their attack and immunity to the freeze. The Ice Queen does not like people in her immediate range and will cast a massive whirlwind, knocking you back, and mini whirlwinds float around the room, encouraging movement. The Ice Queen keeps a shield around her at all times, which must be damaged down preferably by Snowflake, Catwoman, or even Moody Bear, as it absorbs Genie's attacks. Once the shield is down, she must be damaged by a strong fire attack, and you only get one attack on her before she raises her shield again, so it's best to swap in Genie for this point, and if possible, charge up a fireball and land a direct hit on the Ice Queen. Oh, what's this? A boss fight which requires the use of an ally you just got? Oh, that's just like every other boss so far. Powering up Genie before this fight is not just a long-term strategy, but also for this exact moment. The stronger her ring is, the more damage she will output, and equipped with fire as well as an attribute. And with stamina attached, could take about 3 charged fireballs to take her out. Depending on how you've been upgrading and collecting items to this point, could make this fight quite easy to downright difficult. If you're fast enough, the moment the shield is down, immediately switch and charge a fireball with Genie, and the moment the shield is recast, the boss won't cast another spell for a moment, so it's a great time to have a juiced up Snowflake take the shield down in 1 to 2 attacks and recharge back with Genie. Once you know the tactic and have been actively preparing for it, the fight can be the shortest in the game. And with the final hit, the Ice Queen falls and the doors to the church open with a familiar face waiting to fulfill his promise all those years ago. And thus begins one of the most touching moments in this game, which I personally shed a tear at. He waited 100 years for her, 100 years kept alive by the orb. A touching moment, even if he used us to get her back. He had the moon orb all along, and with the orb smashing on the ground, they both disappear without a trace, back to that day. God damn it, game, this moment is still getting to me. Once we get back to town and with 100% of the building and NPC requests sorted, we will be treated to another cutscene where we get the Macho Sword, where we learn that the sheriff is the nephew of the big muscled man back in Newland Village, Macho. Oh, Macho. That's so macho. No, seriously, look at the sword hilt. Vanity much? He really is macho. We get back to the moon people and deliver the moon orb, but something is not quite right. The moon orb never called forth the ship where it is waiting in the sun and moon temple. They suspect something is going on at the temple, and he tasks Theo, one of the moon minions, to assist in the inspection. So there we have it. This brings us on a direct path to the fourth destination the game has to offer, the desert region of Musca Raqqa. Upon entering the outskirts of the temple, we find a lone warrior warning us that the temple is dangerous. Wait a minute. Haven't we experienced this before? A single NPC survives to give us dialogue on direction? No way! And the village of Musca Raqqa has also been obliterated? No way! But we need to go into the temple anyway to gather the Atla? No way! The same one note set up aside. The warrior lacks confidence and refuses to fight. But wait, we can name him for some reason. Now, I know he's holding a staff to fight with, but I also know he can have a very nice spear. I foresee only one reasonable name for him. That's right, Spearman. But Spearman is not an ally, or will he be? Only time will tell. I found this part of the game a bit of a slow burner, and although some touching moments occur between Theo and Spearman outside every so often as you journey through the 18 floors of this dungeon, which is comparable to the previous shipwreck dungeon, the gameplay here really started to wane on me. Maybe that's because I sat down for too long in one sitting and the game just gets very repetitive, with the end goal of each floor being the exact same. So what's new here? Well, we're inside a pyramid structure and there's lots of stone walls, floor and sand. The enemies are generally just a variant of a previously fought enemy and really act like any other dungeon thus far. The overall novelty gets a bit bland after a floor or two as you see the different items used for this dungeon versus the others, such as the gate key. Here is the King's Slate, and to open locked doors you have the stone key, and to enter the back floors you have the secret path key. The focus I kept is just to keep aiming on upgrading my weapons and collecting the Atla for the village. But wait, floor 5 is when all hell breaks loose for me, as Moody Bear is summoned on the sealed floor. My heart sinks and I'm desperately clinging that the gate key drops in a couple of kills, or even the first if I'm lucky. But this is Moody Bear. The game will provide me with no such luck. No merciful death, only a slow torture. So have at you, game. Moody Bear will prevail, or multiple resets until I get a quick gate key. I told you, saving between each floor is useful, so the game finds it amusing to throw 3 golems at me right away. These have high health, hit hard, and can make short work of a weapon smashing against their thick stone bodies. But luckily, Moody Bear and his battle axe, which we obtained from the forest, don't make this as arduous as it could be. I just need to slowly whittle away each golem, even their friend who decides to join, for a grand total of 4 golems. At least we will all be slow together. I discover that timing his special technique just right can take out the golems in no time at all. Maybe I was wrong about you, Moody Bear. Maybe partially. But you're still too slow to be of any tangible, real use. But perfect for these slow, heaving buggers. Which is kind of like yourself.
Back in Muskaraka, we will have a large empty zone where red chests will spawn on the outskirts near the pillars every so often, sometimes along the perimeter outside of the temple also. We're gathering village huts, trees, totem poles, and the like. As we push on further, Spearman will be greeted by a trio of sisters who have had unkind words for him in the past, but they did not know all the truth of what had happened. The sisters were fighting over him and fell out with not just him, but with each other. All this over a man. Come on, ladies, you're better than that. So Spearman explains that over a year ago that he got poisoned by a scorpion and was about to die, and the sister which found him got terrified and ran to find the doctor. Shortly after, another sister came and he told her what had happened, and she went all in. Yes, look at her. Look at what she's doing. Giving pleasure to a dying man? No, mind out of the gutter. She's sucking something alright, but it's not what you think. She's actually sucking out the poison herself. Putting herself in grave danger, they both survived the ordeal, and with everything explained, it gives Spearman the confidence and realization he needed to fight again, so he vows to fight with us. Unfortunately for him, although he may have a longer ranged melee attack, he still pales in comparison to our snowflake over here. Once again, the game giving us a mediocre beginning for a new ally? Oh, I hope this trend does not continue. At least Genie was done right. We head back to the temple, and at the midpoint we need to take out two simple named golems, which act as a mini-boss, but literally are just two golems. Nothing special. With them out of the way, we're introduced to the next barrier mechanic, a black wind. Yes folks, a black wind is conjured at this exact spot and stops us from going further. Oh, I wonder if our new ally, Spearman, can somehow blast it all away. What's this? You mean he can spin his weapon in fast succession and blow it all away? Damn, what luck we have. We proceed to the next floor and try out Spearman against the first enemy we encounter, and I can tell you, it is not pity. This lone event enough warranted him to never be used again. After a lot of experience gaining, advancing our Wise Owl sword to plus 15, we finally have the stats obtained to upgrade it. Let's watch as it transforms into the mighty Lamb's sword. But its subtext mentions it appears to be weak, but, mystery, I wonder what hidden power it can do. Spoiler, a big attack boost when its weapon health is low. And damn it, I spoke too soon. As soon as we enter floor 13, Spearman is called, and similar to Moody Bear, I hope the game grants me mercy. I found myself restarting this floor multiple times due to deaths, or just not getting the key after a few kills. God damn you, game. I find myself hating these Dune monsters more and more in this game due to their quick attacks and shields. Back outside and aiming for 100% completion, Muskaraka is easily the most annoying village to achieve 100% due to its main gimmick of aligning the totem pole heads with the corresponding totems outside buildings, and some citizens on top of this requiring additional requests. But we suffer on through, and we are treated to the revival of the village, and just like that, the village chieftain awards us with this. What? A spear? Damn, the prophecy has come true, and Spearman name holds true! Along with this, we get a valuable upgrade stone in the form of a diamond, and I just love socketing gemstones into my gear, even if temporarily for the stat boosts. Around the same time as this, we have gained both the sun and moon signets from different NPCs within the village to allow us to open the final door to the boss floor. We make our way back inside to find a floating coffin. Lo and behold, this must be the king's curse. And of course, the spirit is possessed by the dark genie. What do you think? The game was going to try and be imaginative? This fight is not really even a fight. All you must do is use Spearman. Yes, using the ally we just got to solve the boss gimmick. I know. To blow away the spirit form of the king when it is chasing after you. You can literally just stand there until he comes to you, gain some distance, wait for him to come to you, the spirit retreats and opens the coffin for a direct attack. Switch to your best attacker and repeat for a few hits. It's a huge letdown compared to Lasaya, heck, to any other boss so far. And with the curse removed, we gain access to the ship, but the temple is collapsing. So with a dashing attempt, followed by a quick time event, which we have not seen in quite a while, it just throws one out here for some reason, to try make us suffer a little bit more, to add some more stake. It just seems so out of place and a mechanic rarely used. I still do not see why it was included in this game. But with that done, we board the moon ship and everyone gasps as they see it rise from the temple. And with that, we see ourselves flying to the moon and land where we are greeted by the moon people who state the mayor is not here. So we are guided around the village only to be dropped off right next to the entrance to the next dungeon, which involves searching the moon's craters for the Atla. Yes, the dark genie also destroyed things on the moon and scattered them across the floors. Craters in this case. This part of the game plays out like any of the rest, and once again, outside of an environment palette swap and some different items to be used for mechanics we have seen time and time again, the moon is just very boring, but quite great for experience to upgrade our weapons. If we have been using Genie often, and I know I certainly have, the sealed floor and level 3 is dedicated to her, so to me it was not an issue whatsoever. The main objective of this moon dungeon is to find the Atla. Not much of a story, but what's inside the Atla is the cool thing. Unlike other regions, we are not constructing buildings, we are constructing a giant robot capable of halting the Dark Genie. This Mega Force Transformer is the last line of defense the moon people have, so we find ourselves in a huge factory constructing the robot, paying attention to the left and right pieces. We will have a chart to follow to show us how the robot should look, so it's actually quite enjoyable, and getting 100% is needed to get the final item of the zone and progressing. So all this robot talk is brought by finding the mayor of the moon people around halfway through the zone, and he will then ask us to finish the construction on the sun giant. But for it to properly work, we will need not only collect the Atla, but also a sun sphere, which just so happens to be the reward in the boss area of this dungeon, the Colosseum. No way! The game giving us another MacGuffin to follow? Say it can't be so. But wait, what's this? Continuing talking to this mayor gives us the ability to name him. So this must be the final ally we encounter in the game, one of the moon people. Well then, I guess it's only right to appropriately name him. That's right, Moon Man. And that's right, ladies and gentlemen, and all my lovely unicorn out there, the game ensures we find out that Moon Man's powers on floor 11 when he must be chosen to complete the floor. Although he is a ranged character, he pales in comparison to our lovely Genie and hits like a wet noodle. This game really needed to get its starting balance right to these allies, so I just end up once again wishing, just like Moody Bear and Spearman before, that the gate key drops early. Lady Luck found a way to give me the key on the third kill, and this painfully slow killing machine made this floor very tedious. What makes matters even worse, on the floor itself there are golems which start spawning, which are highly resistant to physical damage, and worse so, they are very hard to bypass, so you need to try maneuver around them, which can be quite painful on tight corridors. Although I found the key early, the exit was far from my sight, so I spent the whole time praying I did not die. What I find amusing is that the Moon Man can fly over crevasses which Catwoman can simply jump over, but on bridges he cannot fly over that gap. It's just a bit silly. Also, I am aware of the game's boundaries, but since he can clearly fly over the dungeon path, he could just simply fly over the path boundaries. But I guess that would make this region far too easy. It just looks silly, that's all. Finally, we have the robot assembled and given an admission ticket to enter the Colosseum for a chance to win the Sun Sphere. Now, to cut out a lot of useless dialogue hyping up to the boss Minotaur Joe, he is another disappointing boss, possibly almost as bad as the King's Curse. But the game breaks tradition in that we don't need our new ally to actually complete the gimmick. The Minotaur runs around the room trying to chug a barrel. If he succeeds, he will gain the effect of stamina, and you just need to kite him around until it finally wears off. All I needed to do was hit him once, He would run off and then go and chug one of the closest barrels to him. Just always stay relatively close and that's it. Once he picks up the barrel, hit him and step back and repeat for a few more rounds of this until he collapses. This encounter is just brutally bad and such a lackluster way to end off the 5th dungeon of the game. I clipped this boss to hell as it's just that bad. And with the Sun Sphere Urs, we head back to base, add it to the Sun Giant, and the Moon Man holds an operations meeting to discuss the plan of attack. Now comes a very lengthy chain of scenes, which takes around 40 minutes to complete, so you better not be in a rush to save and go out. Well, technically you can have a quick save after about 30 minutes, but right after this is more dialogue and story. So we fly towards Dark Heaven Castle with our Sun Giant, and after some more Dark Genie dancing and spell popping, the attacks are useless, and we are ready for our Bulbasaur Solar Beam and obliterate the Dark Genie. But wait, it's not over just yet. The Dark Genie was nothing but a mouse. Really? A mouse? That got too close to the urn and acted as a ruse. The real Dark Genie inhabited the General, and after some talk about how he will rule the world and usher in an age of darkness, he summons up his shadow magic and takes us out in the process. But the use of such strong magic proves too much for the General's body, so he casts it aside and escapes in a dark cloud. Yes, like the name of the game. Luckily, Dran came out of nowhere to scoop us up as we fall. Remember Dran, the first boss of the first dungeon in the game, which we heard nothing about until this moment? Well, yeah, here he is, just randomly. After our robot literally just exploded. Don't ask me how we survived, the game doesn't say this, it just expects us to believe it. And for the other companions we had, they just fell on a cloud. Yes, because that's how clouds work. They are solid foundations. Right, game? Okay, let's just move on before we, spend too much time on this point, because this part is just ludicrous. So moving on, we prance through the air and we are dropped outside of the castle's entrance where we can finally save. But to save this time, I'll fast track right to the next scene. As you can see on the scenes in the background, remember the silver-haired man from near the start of the game in the opening scene? And then again in Dran's cave? Yeah, about 30 hours ago in game time, right? Well, he's finally making a reappearance and fills us in on important storylines, which could have been drip-fed to us throughout the game if the story was competent enough to do so. Remember how I initially mentioned the real meat of the story does not actually take place until towards the end? Well, here it is. 400 years ago, there was a war and he was the king of the East to defend the people from the West. But the power of the wizard's army was too great, so then a Dark Lord appeared and granted him the power to assure victory. He had to make a decision and he wanted to protect his people. He used the Force and won the war, but then his beloved was struck down, assassinated right before he could do anything, so he could not protect those who meant the dearest to him. Stricken with grief, the change within himself took control and the Dark Genie was born. He vowed to stop the magic he had unleashed and discovered a precious gem created by the earth only once an eon. That's right, the stone we hold, the Atomilia, and it would appear 400 years later. So he then used time magic to travel 400 years into the future to present day, which is a small callback to our first encounter with him. He tells us the Dark Genie wants to send a piece of himself to every age. This will become important for how closely the sequel actually labours into this story too. But enough of that for now. He informs us that the Dark Genie is a mass of negative energy and cannot be defeated, but we can change the history of his birth and erase his being. Okay game, I've been following everything else you expect me to believe on this adventure, so why not? How do we defeat this foe? But before we get the answer,
The Dark Genie tries to take over him again, so he stabs himself through the torso and tells us to enter the Gallery of Time so we can guide his spirit through the journey to find the fragments of his memory. And with that, we set off through time, a massive 25-floor dungeon going back from 5 years into the past to 400. So let's get into it, shall we? Cause time is money, friend. As we open the few atla on each floor in this final dungeon, we will acquire multiple of the same item as it plays out in the story of events. More or less the story we were just told, but with extra information in the final result. There is no city building here, just building up the story from start to finish as we journey back 400 years. This dungeon will be the ultimate challenge so far, with a wide range of monsters, many of which are variants of previous monsters, but of course higher stats, and the dungeon plays out quite similar as any other dungeon, except there is no midway point to break up, or additional allies or gimmicks until the final floors. Once we battle our way to the 19th floor, upgrading our weapons to be as strong as we can before the final confrontation, focusing primarily on Snowflake and Genie, we arrive at the final gimmicks of the game, where each floor from now on will be a sealed floor where we will need to use our allies from the earliest to the most recent. That's right, the game is trying to make sure you gave them some love. Or be like me and just reset if appropriate. First off, we have Catwoman, whom is actually my third most used character, primarily because of the bandit slingshot, which throughout the game provided me with a lot of stolen items from enemies, and then selling them off to make me big cash. Next up, we have Moody Bear, and with a stroke of luck, after the second enemy of the floor, we gathered the necessary gate key, which are called clock hands, and also on another stroke of luck, the exit was right next to the entrance. It's not that Moody Bear is a bad character, he's just slow, and Snowflake does it better. Moody Bear, this was your last usage of the game. Sleep well, my friend. Next up, we have Genie as my second most used character. This floor was just a cakewalk, funnily obtaining the gate key in the opening room, so I had to spend time finding the exit. At this stage of the game, she is hitting like an absolute truck, which makes it glorious for the final battle. Remember, I did say pay close attention to her. Next up, Spearman had the same luck as the three before him, also obtaining the clock hands in the first room, which had me very overjoyed. Take a well-deserved seat, warrior. This was your last outing. And finally, Moonman took the longest to find the key, unfortunately for me, as he was still damn weak, so it was a painful floor to overcome. But luckily, the exit was next to the entrance, and with that, I got to the penultimate floor before the boss. For the final floor, you must find the clock hands and reach the clock while having assembled all parts of the story in the book to this point, piecing together the fragments of Sita. But we do get to see the story played out once again in its entirety. I really do enjoy this music. Upon reading the final chapter, the gate opens, and the annoying thing is although you can save, you will then need to play out the entire story again when you open the final boss room, and if you die during the encounter, and you most likely will, before figuring out how it works, as it's not an easy fight, you need to do the whole process again. What a bad decision, game. Like, we've already listened to the story multiple times only to have it in our face right again before the final scenes of the game, then fight the final boss, possibly die, and then repeat the whole thing all over again. It's just an unnecessary weight added to a lovely ending to the game. The final battle against the true form of the Dark Genie appears, and he looks a lot more like a Devil May Cry character than any other character in the game, and miles better on improvement than what we thought he looked like in the beginning. He feels out of place though, but being a being created 400 years ago, maybe this is a nice change. Okay, it's strategy time. The Dark Genie can be a long fight with 3 phases, where proper preparation can shave off minutes from the fight, such as multiple elements ready, upgraded weapons, stamina drinks, and food for recovery. I had the ultimate weapon for both Snowflake and Genie entering this fight, which can cause huge damage numbers. However, this is not needed. The first phase is to dodge his arm as it rips through the ground. As we can see, each arm will have an elemental symbol, so we have an idea what is about to come before the arm appears before us. Once you see him plunging his arm down, just move to dodge it. It will be weak to the corresponding element, so raising elemental attributes can be important during this encounter. The annoying part of this encounter is the constant switching back and forth by changing attributes or characters to ensure they can counter the weakness. In phase 2, he will stop his arm attacks, and the head becomes the main focus, and Genie, oh, our trusted Genie, comes in incredibly handy here. It is important to constantly run from side to side to avoid the head beam, as it can be quite lethal, and attack when you can. He also does a pushback, and I don't believe there's a way of countering it unless you maybe use a stamina drink or have a clever use of techniques which can briefly make you invulnerable, like Moody Bear. But having a healthy supply of these drinks and food before the final fight is desirable. Go all out, it is the final fight, and ends the fight a lot faster. The goal is to get out of this phase as soon as you can, so the stamina drink is a great option here. Finally, just when you think it's all over, the Dark Genie will reappear as a gigantic demonic spider-like thingy. He will spawn 2 guards to assist him, which are slow and kind of a waste of time to destroy, as they will be reanimated after a short time, but it can buy you some wiggle room here and there. The goal is to aim for the white orb in his mouth, which will appear before he does his beam attack, which follows you around the room. Running from side to side will prevent this from ever hitting you. The save running time, Genie is extremely useful here, and with some well-timed stamina drinks, pumped up spells, the fight will be over in no time. With the Dark Genie defeated, and mocking our futile efforts as he will only come back, we ready our plan of action with the backing of our dear friend, the Fairy King. We reach out to find the soul of Sophia, Sida, the silver-haired man's wife, to stop the Dark Genie being born in the first place, because without him knowing grief, he would never be consumed. So we are changing history itself. With this final heroic act, Sophia wakes up in the arms of the one she loves. We have sacrificed the Atamilia, but we will no longer have any use for it, as we have set out to accomplish what we came to do. Sophia informs Sida of her efforts and the wish to create a new world. The game ends with the final lines. Let's make it together. A kingdom free, full of smiling faces, a new history leading into a bright future. And as bonus content after the credits, players can take on the ultimate challenge, scaling up 100 floors of the Demon Shaft Tower. There is no story here, only the objective to reach the top and defeat the Black Knight Pendragon, a feat I would not be daft to do nowadays, but lovers of this game will undoubtedly take up this challenge for many additional hours of gameplay. Inside features creatures from all over the game with powered up stats, changing every 20 floors, and elemental weaknesses. I've included a quick snippet of the first floor just for context. And that's it, my dark cloud loving unicorns. I hope you enjoyed this colossal video and the many hours it took me to make this, and including the full playthrough just to get the footage needed for this video as well. If you want to see more full game playthroughs condensed down into manageable viewing content, then sound off in the comments below, or even in my Discord. And please engage with this content, like it, anything you can do, share it, anything like that, it will be a huge help to me. Despite a lot of repetitiveness, some clunky mechanics, and a lackluster story, which mostly was hidden away till the end, Dark Cloud is a memorable game which stands the tests of time, and I highly recommend it to be played during your lifetime and witness the unique blending of dungeon crawling action RPG with city building elements. Thank you for your support. If you liked the video and you want to see more, then please click that subscribe button below. Thank you for watching, and in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Jay signing out. Farewell.